we were discussing the conversation which took place in Banaras. So, Sri Ma Sharda Devi was explaining to Ras Bihari Maharaj the importance of Kashi or Banaras as per the scriptures. But then the disciple was not convinced. Swami Arupananda wanted to hear from Holy Mother's own lips, through her own lips, what is the real significance of Banaras? Whether, as is said in the Shastras, anybody who dies in Banaras gets moksha. So, in the beginning, we saw in the previous class that Holy Mother was saying that Sri Krishna saw that Ma Kali removes all the bondages of Maya and Shiva comes and gives liberation. Shiva, who is the presiding deity of Kashi, Banaras. So that was what Sri Krishna said. But the disciple was not convinced. He said, I don't want to hear what scriptures say and what Sri Krishna said. I just want to know what is your opinion. What happens if a person dies in Banaras? Does he get mukti? And then when Holy Mother emphatically says, you have to believe, it does not matter in the least to God whether you believe in these things or not. Even sage Shuka was full of faith and the conviction of realization. He says he is at the most like a big ant compared to the infinite glory and the majesty of God. It really, the greatest of sadhakas also are just like a big ant at the most. He is infinite. How much can you understand of him? Our master was a man of direct perception. He saw everything, he knew everything. So that is the idea of incarnation in our Hindu scriptures, that when you become one with the infinite mind, the Mahat, the Ishvara, then you know everything, you are conscious of everything, what the individual mind, uh, how the individual mind or how the individual uh, personality, which is made of ego, the buddhi, the limited buddhi, as I told you in the previous class, Raj Yoga class, that the sum total of all the buddhis is the Mahat, the universal mind, of which our minds are a small part. And in that, when the ego is very predominant, we consider ourselves as separate from the cosmic mind. And to the extent we consider ourselves separate, the more we suffer. At times, when we feel our connection with Ishvara or the universal mind, Ishvara is one who has a universal mind, whether you call him Krishna or Rama or Ram Krishna, whichever deity or whichever avatara you believe in. We have to understand that it is the capacity to see everything in and through every jiva, to know everything. So Sri Ramakrishna had that capacity to understand the subtle truths as no other human being could do. So the Holy Mother says his words are the words of the Veda. What will you do if you do not believe in his words? So she was a bit upset with Ras Bihari Maharaj when he said, Sri Ramakrishna must have said, but I want to hear from you. He had more faith in his Guru, that is Holy Mother, than perhaps Sri Ramakrishna, because he used to feel that I have not seen Sri Ramakrishna, but I see you and I have faith in you. And because you are my Guru, I want an answer from you. But anyway, Mother tries to tell him that so it is not only the scriptures which say that one who dies in Kashi gets moksha, but also the fact that Sri Ramakrishna attested to this fact. So she says, what can I do if you do not believe in his words? I the best thing I can do is quote. Otherwise, I can't. Uh, I mean, you should develop that conviction. So, disciple then gives an answer. He gives the reason why he is having doubts. He says the scriptures themselves differ. Some scriptures say this and some scriptures say that. Which shall we accept? That is why I am bothering you. Because there are some instances where you will find that some people do not seem to believe. They said it's not necessary. Kabir, for example, decided to die when he was about to die. Somebody told him that you are inside Kashi, so you have no worry. He said, no, that means I don't have faith in my Guru. If I have faith in my Guru and the mantra given by him, then I should get moksha whether I die in Kashi or not. So he decided to go outside the limits of Kashi and he died there, the great Saint Kabir. So there are exceptions. So that's why some saints say this, some scriptures say this, some scriptures like the Kashi Khanda, which was being read in front of Holy Mother, explain the glory of the great Tirtha, the shining Kashi. Kashi means that which shines, the city which shines with a golden hue. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna saw in his vision how the white colored Shiva comes and utters the Taraka mantra in every jiva. And then Holy Mother confirms that it is not only the jiva, but even mosquitoes and animals who die in Kashi get liberation. So the disciple now is confused. Swami Arupananda is a bit confused. So he wants to get confirmation from Srima Sharda Devi whether people who die in Kashi, they get mukti. And if they get mukti, do animals and the insects, they also, will they get mukti? Holy Mother emphatically says, yes, even a mosquito will get mukti. So the glory of Kashi, as explained in the scriptures and as attested by Sri Ramakrishna, because of his own vision. You remember Mathurnath Babu had arranged for Sri Ramakrishna's visit to Banaras, and he happened to have so many visions, and he felt the city of Kashi or the Tirtha of Kashi so holy that he could not go for his ablutions. He had to go every day. Mathur Babu had to arrange for Sri Ramakrishna to go outside the limits of Kashi to to clean himself, to go to the bathroom and all those things. He could not perform the ablutions. He says, I see in front of my eyes the shining, glorious Kashi. So how can I do my ablutions here? So he could, in his vision, see the glory of Kashi. So Holy Mother says, if you do not believe in Sri Ramakrishna's words, his words are the words of Veda. They are based on experience, direct experience. They are not a result of book learning. We think we learn so many books, we hear so many lectures, we hear so many talks, and we believe that we have understood everything about spirituality. But Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, and in fact Swamiji himself said that religion is realization. If you don't realize what you believe, if you don't experience it, if it is not a matter of direct experience, then you will find that no matter what you believe in, or no matter which scripture, how many scriptures you read, there is bound to be confusion. So there is no substitute for direct experience, direct vision, when things will be so clear that you will not doubt at all. So Sri Ramakrishna now gives the example. Our Holy Mother gives the example which Sri Ramakrishna used to give. She says that Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the almanac, the Panjika which we refer, they predict rain. There are many ways of predicting. Now, of course, we have the weather forecast and other things. But in those days, depending on the nakshatra and tithi, a rough forecast was made that there will be rain in this season, there will be rain under this nakshatra, and all those things. But Sri Ramakrishna used to say there may be these predictions, but even if you squeeze the whole almanac, if the Panjika, the Panchanga, which they say, even if you squeeze the Panchanga, you will not get a single drop of rain by squeezing its pages. So, and besides, she says, there are many things, useless things, which we have to discriminate and find out in the scriptures. Scriptures consist of great eternal teachings, Nitya and Anitya. So the Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka, which we have to do to find out which are temporary, which are the things which are temporary, which are the things which will take us towards the permanent. So scripture also deal with eternal truths, but scriptures also have rituals. They have small, lesser truths, and the lesser truths confuse people. The lesser truths, they confuse people, and people believe that following these rituals, you will understand what true religion is. But unfortunately, no matter which ritual you perform, it is just increasing some kind of materialism in your life. So rituals have only one purpose, to focus your mind on higher and higher truths. If it does it, then rituals are okay. But if it doesn't result in giving up the gross world and thinking of higher and higher truths, like the spirit, like the consciousness, the different subtle elements in our personality. As I told you, there is this Annamaya Kosha, there is this Pranamaya Kosha, there is Manomaya Kosha, there is Vijnanamaya Kosha, and finally we have Anandamaya Kosha. So at 5 different levels, human personality, it's a mixture of all these things. You can't say that we are just Annamaya Kosha. We also have a Pranamaya Kosha, the life force which conducts all the activities of the body. But at the same time, we have a reactive mind, a mind which is always reacting to external stimuli. That is known as Manomaya Kosha. Whereas there is a higher part of the mind which is the Vijnanamaya Kosha, where you understand subtle things. You understand the subtle truths of spirituality by using your buddhi, which is part of this higher faculty of a human being, which is known as Vijnanamaya Kosha. So there are scriptures which deal with rituals, which can deal at the most with the lower 3 koshas. It can deal with your Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, and the Manomaya Kosha. It gives us certain techniques which can help us to lead a very happy and a harmonious life. They are also necessary. Just as in yoga, we need asana, we need pranayama, then we slowly go to pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, then dhyana, and then samadhi. So the different koshas, when you meditate or when you start practicing spirituality, you go to higher and higher levels of existence. And the higher the level, the more eternal it is, the more permanent it is. So how to decide what is temporary, what is permanent? How to decide what is nitya, what is anitya? Nitya means permanent, anitya means that which is not permanent but temporary. So Annamaya Kosha, we have seen, as soon as the body, the life is over, the prana goes away from the body becomes lifeless. So that death is of the Annamaya Kosha, and also the prana leaves the body. So what is remaining? A little bit of the subtle prana, along with a the little bit of subtle prana plus the manas, not the reactive mind as such, because the reactive mind needs the organs, the indriyas, to communicate with the outside world. So a person who dies, the subtle body which lives, perhaps it does not take the same reactive mind to the next birth. To the next birth, we carry those samskaras. We carry the subtle mind, the higher mind, the Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha, where our samskaras lie. those samskaras are revived in the next birth. But we don't take the same prana or the same Annamaya Kosha which we have to leave behind. So the injunctions of the scriptures, when you read any scriptures, they deal with the Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha to live a contented, a happy, and a life of self-control. We have to control the indriyas. We should not misuse it. We should not misuse the Annamaya Kosha. We should not misuse the Pranamaya Kosha. If we misuse it, we will have diseases. That is what the definition of disease is. When we don't regulate the prana and the Annamaya Kosha, we don't take care of that, we get physical diseases. But if we don't take care of the Manomaya Kosha, the reactive mind causes mental problems, subtle diseases, psychosomatic diseases. So there are scriptures. There are scriptures which deal with the lower koshas, the ritual part of it. If we do it properly, our uh, life in the world will be more harmonious, more peaceful, and if the mind also will become more calm. But the scriptures have some useless things also, which one does not really need. For example, there are scriptures which teach you how to get certain kinds of powers. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras also we found that there are certain sadhanas which help you to read people's mind, and there are so many useless techniques which add to your confusion. For example, if we there is this idea known as Savitarka Samadhi in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. That Savitarka Samadhi helps you whenever you focus on certain gross or subtle things, you get power over them. So the question is asked now, if we focus on the mind, the reactive mind, then there are so many minds around us. So we can get an idea of what those minds think. So mind reading may not be so very common, but it is not impossible. But the problem is whether it is of any use. Patanjali says no. The reading of mind, actually we have our own minds to deal with. We have enough problems. So that is why the Bible says, sufficient unto the day the evil thereof. Throughout the day, we have been taxing the mind. There are so many vibrations and disturbances in our own mind. Now, using these powers, if some person goes and tries to understand the other minds, his confusion will increase. Just as getting involved. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, now and then go to have some Nirjan Vas. Why does he say Nirjan Vas? We are so much fascinated by socializing that we cannot stay for a moment alone with our own minds. We want to interfere with other minds, with other people. We want to engage in conversation. We want to do so many things. So this intermixing or excessive socialization is detrimental to spiritual life. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, either have satsanga, which will elevate your mind, or at least have, if you can't have sadhu sangha, at least go into solitude. So solitude will help you in a different way. It will prevent you from unnecessarily get disturbed by the thoughts and the actions of others. So at least that is a preventive measure. But a positive measure would be to engage in holy company. People who have raised their mind above the reactive mind level, and they are not prone to reactions. Their minds are not highly reactive. That's why you will find such people calm, collected. They have a very, very calming effect on our minds, on other minds. So a few minutes in the company of holy people, or even the company of by reading the gospel or any other holy book, you will find that you get a lot of mm, uh, uh, just a minute. Yeah. So when there are very high and positive vibrations in holy company, your mind has a tendency to give up the reactive mode of interaction and then go to the buddhi level, which is the Vijnanamaya Kosha level. So that is why the Gayatri Mantra, the prayer which we utter, where we constantly pray to the sun or to the bright uh, um, light of knowledge, which is represented by the sun, and we say, please illumine my buddhi, dhiyo yona prachodayata. Dhi means the buddhi. So unless our buddhi is awakened, we cannot be living in a higher plane. So there are certain teachings in the scriptures which deal with the awakening of buddhi. So that is why Holy Mother says that you have to be selective. You have to take only those portions which help you to awaken your consciousness, awaken your buddhi. We should not be dealing with the certain things which engage us in lower pursuits, though they are there in the scriptures. So, Holy Mother says one cannot observe the letter to the letter the injunctions of the scriptures. The master used to say, she's quoting Sri Ramakrishna, she says, the master used to say, Bhakti hedged around by scriptural injunctions hardly justifies the name. Now, if you are day and night bothered about the rituals and all the scriptural injunctions which lead to some kind of worldly prosperity or some kind of gain in the world, because there are so many types of devotion. As Bhagwan Sri Krishna says, people in trouble also pray to the Lord. There are four kinds of bhaktas. People who pray to God only when there is trouble. People who want some kind of prosperity in life, they also pray to God. So they are a kind of bhakti. They follow a kind of bhakti which is of a lower variety. So if the bhakti, the pure bhakti, is hedged around by scriptural injunctions, if one is too much into the performance of different rituals, then it is not called pure bhakti, ahetuki bhakti. So to get ahetuki bhakti, Holy Mother says you have to believe in the eternal teachings of the scriptures, which deal with higher aspects of our reality, not just with the Annamaya Kosha or the Pranamaya Kosha. Otherwise, for every single problem, there are many ways to solve that problem. We can do it ourselves. We don't need God for these things. That is why when Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from cancer, when Naren and others said, why don't you pray to Mother to cure you? He said, I prayed, but Mother said, why are you putting your mind on this useless body and the mind? You just focus on the higher aspects of your personality. So he taught a big lesson that one should be very careful when we deal with certain scriptural injunctions which just help us to strengthen our physical existence, or may at the most may help us to satisfy our selfish desires and our uh, life in the world. It will make the life a little smoother, or it may give us some advantages, but ultimately you will find that it is binding us more and more. It won't make us free. So that's why Holy Mother says that be careful. There are many things in the scriptures, but take only that which takes you towards the Nitya, the permanent, the eternal, not towards the Anitya. So you have to have the discrimination between Nitya and Anitya. So then Holy Mother says, while staying at Kamarpukur, after my return from Brindavan, I took off my bracelets for fear of public criticism. You see, according to the Hindu tradition, a widow is not supposed to wear ornaments. And after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, like all other women of Bengal, she, Thakur, if you remember, had made two beautiful bracelets for her, because he was very sorry and he felt very sad when the young Sharada, when after marriage, they had to, they were so poor that they had to bring ornaments, hire it for, not hire it, borrow it from the neighbors, rich neighbors, and put those ornaments on Ma Sharada when she was a small girl. So after While she was sleeping, Sri Ramakrishna very carefully removed that and returned it to the original owner. After the marriage was over, uh, the Sri Ramakrishna took away all those ornaments, and Sharda was very young at that time. She was hardly 5 or 6 years. So she started crying. She said, "Where are my ornaments?" So Sri Ramakrishna felt very bad that I cannot afford to give ornaments to my Sarda. So he had decided, when he managed to collect a little money, he had two golden bracelets made for Holy Mother, and he gave it to her because he said she is Saraswati, she is Lakshmi, and it would not look good if she doesn't wear some ornaments, though she led a very, very simple and austere life. But Holy Mother, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, did not want to keep these bracelets according to the Hindu tradition, because widows would never wear these bracelets. So, fearing public criticism, she was about to remove the golden bangles. In fact, people were already talking about it, that her husband has died, Sri Ramakrishna had passed away, and she is still wearing the golden bracelets. She is performing sacrilege. So the scriptures, that's what Holy Mother says. These are the temporary injunctions of the scriptures, that a widow should not do this, a widow should not do that. There are so many things. But Sri Ramakrishna gave her a vision where she said, "Where have I gone? I am not dead. I've just gone to another room." So he prevented her. He said, "No, let people criticize, but you have to wear those bracelets." But then he says, "I also wish to go for bath in the Ganga, for which I have always had a, when she was staying in Kamarpukur. There is no Ganga there, but she had a special devotion. But the river is far away from Kamarpukur. Now, one day I saw, to my great surprise, the master was coming towards the house from the direction of the Bhutis canal. There's a small canal near Kamarpukur, and Holy Mother just had a desire that, see, when I was in Dakshineshwar, at least I could have a bath in the Ganga daily. People revere Ganga so much. So she saw, but one day she saw a strange vision where Sri Ramakrishna was coming from the direction of the canal, where they used to use the Bhutis canal for uh, cleaning and other things, for bath and all. He was followed by Naren, Baburam, and Rakhal and many other devotees. Further, I saw that from his feet sprang a stream of water which flowed in front of him in waves. I said to myself, I see he is everything. The Ganges are flowing from his lotus feet. So till then, she had a desire that she is missing. I mean, she is now trying to, Holy Mother is trying to tell us that the external rituals like taking bath in the Ganga, going to pilgrimage places, these are all external things. But our Ishta, that is Sri Ramakrishna himself, she saw in a vision, Sri Ramakrishna showed her a wonderful vision where Ganges is has sprung from the lotus feet. Quickly I plucked flowers from the side of the Raghuvir temple and offer handfuls of them into the stream. The master then said to me, when she had this vision, very clear, Sri Ramakrishna had passed away, had entered Mahasamadhi, but this was much later. But she was about to remove the bracelets, and she was just thinking that how I miss the Ganga. If Sri Ramakrishna were to be alive, then I would have been in Dakshineshwar and then I would have taken the Ganga bath. But the problem was solved when she saw from Sri Ramakrishna's feet this holy Ganges water is flowing. So she immediately took some flowers and uh, offered it. And then she believed in the fact that Sri Ramakrishna has become everything. He is Ganga. So worshipping him, you are worshipping as if you are going to all the different tirthas. And then the master in that vision tells Holy Mother, don't take off the bracelets. Do you know the Vaishnava Tantras? You see, Sri Ramakrishna, though he had not read these books, Bhairavi Brahmani had taught him the Vaishnava Tantras. So he says, don't you know Vaishnava Tantras? I said, I don't know, because she was not aware of all these scriptures. I said, what are they? I do not know anything about them. Thereupon he said, Gauri Mani, Gauri Ma will come here this afternoon and she will tell you about them. That very afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna said, if you don't know about this Vaishnava Tantras, she will come, and Gaur Dasi, who was alive, Gauri Ma, who became a sannyasini, she will come and she will tell you about the Vaishnava Tantras. There you will get an answer for uh, the fact that you should not remove the bracelets. So that very afternoon, Gaurdasi arrived, and Gauri Mani or Gauri Ma arrived and learned, and she, Holy Mother, she came and told Holy Mother that her husband, in according to Vaishnava Tantras, the husband is Chinmaya, pure spirit. So the death of the body doesn't mean anything. You don't have to remove or follow any rules. The rules are meant for people who believe in the external rituals. But those who go deep, for them there is no death. Your husband is still alive. He is pure Chinmaya, pure spirit. Where does the pure spirit go? The pure spirit remains. So from that point of view, the scriptures say something else. These are the eternal truths to which we have to hold on to and not depend. The idea behind this conversation is Holy Mother is telling the Ras Behari Maharaj that there are so many rituals and customs which you will find, which are also part of the scriptures. You don't have to take them, because there are other scriptures which say that for every woman the husband is the pure spirit. So I remember there is one famous incident where another Vaishnava, for example, Mirabai, when Mirabai was about to go to Banaras, she wanted to meet the Goswami there, who was a great saint. She wanted to have her darshan. But that Goswami had a strict rule that he will not meet women or see women's face. So he, being a monk of the highest order, he had made a rule and that no woman can directly see him, and he would not talk, converse with women. So this was conveyed to Mirabai. The Sevaks, they told Mirabai that you cannot meet him because he does not meet women. Then Mirabai told something very significant, which opened the eyes of that Goswami. She said, I thought other than Sri Krishna, there is no Purusha. All are Prakriti. We are all Prakriti, whether you are a male or if you have a male body or a female body. The spirit is always separate. So for a woman or for a man, the wife or the husband is pure spirit, Chinmaya. So if that is true, Chinmaya or the consciousness, Krishna is the only Purusha in Vrindavan. All others are Prakriti. So why do you make a distinction between man and woman? So immediately that Goswami begged forgiveness from Mirabai and allowed her to come and meet. He said, today you have taught me a great lesson. So Sri Ramakrishna gave a vision where he told Holy Mother that you don't have to remove your bangles, because where have I gone? I am the pure spirit. According to the Vaishnava Tantra, Gauri Ma comes and tells Holy Mother that whether it's a husband or a wife, it's a pure spirit that remains even after death. In this Kali Yuga, Holy Mother says, one attains to God if one simply sticks to truth. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Kalite Satya Bolai Tapasya, Satya Kali Yugir Tapasya. To tell the truth is the tapasya for this Kali Yuga. You don't have to do lot of tapasya as they did in other yugas. In other yugas, you have to do lot of austerities, tapasya, to get realization. Whereas in Sat Kali Yuga, Sri Ramakrishna said, according to the scriptures, talking or thinking, speaking or acting in a truthful way, if one simply sticks to truth, one can attain God. That is the tapasya for this yuga, Kali Yuga. The master used to say, he who speaks nothing but truth is resting on the lap of God. He is already resting on the lap of God. He doesn't have to put in much efforts to do sadhana, because the truth itself. That's why Sri Ramakrishna offered everything to mother. He says, take away my devotion, or take away my um, uh, goodness, virtue, take away my sin. Take both. I don't want anything. But he said, I could not say, take away my truth and take away my untruth. Because truth is one thing which he could not offer. He said, I gave away everything, I dedicated everything to my Divine Mother except truth. Because if I give away truth, that means I will be falsifying whatever I have offered to the mother. The very fact that I have offered all these things, and unless I hold on to truth, then my offering will be wasted. I will not be doing justice to all my sadhana. So, resting, a person who speaks always speaks, acts, and here or acts, speaks, and behaves in a truthful manner, he is already resting on the lap of God. So, during the master's illness, when Sri Ramakrishna was ill, I used to boil and condense milk for him and take to him 2 pounds of milk, saying that it was 1. So he was advised to take less milk, and he was very keen not to break the rule. But Holy Mother knew that if proper nutrition is not there, so she used to boil it continuously, condense and boil the milk so that it is condensed, and 2 pounds of milk would become 1 pound by constant heating. So, and she used to tell him, this is only 1 pound of milk, you have to take this throughout the day. I would not tell him the correct quantity. One day he came to know about it and said, when Sri Ramakrishna got angry, what is this? Stick to truth. You see, I have bowel complaints on account of taking a large quantity of milk. Surprisingly enough, that very day he suffered from disorder of bowels. He had all powers, but it is not so with us. So, even a slight untruth, actually it was not untruth. Holy Mother, out of some kind of good intention, she decided that the master should take more milk. Otherwise, his health will not be good. So she condensed it. And when she condensed it, she should have told that these are 2 seers of milk, 2 pounds of milk. But because it was condensed, it has become less. That doesn't take away the fact that it had 2 seers of milk. So it's a kind of untruth. And Sri Ramakrishna, even consciously or unconsciously, anything that was untruthful, which was not truthful, uh, he would not, his body and his whole personality would react to that. So immediately he suffered disorder of the bowels. So Holy Mother says he had all these powers. He could know uh, the intention or the truth behind everything that he encountered. So disciple says, my asking you all these questions or talking in this manner. So the disciple feels that I did a bad thing by asking, doubting Sri Ramakrishna's words and telling mother that please you tell me. Sri Ramakrishna must have told, but so Holy Mother is now trying to convince the disciple that Sri Ramakrishna spoke only truth, truth and nothing but truth. So how can you doubt him? How can you think, why do you want proof about him? Because whatever he said was truth. Even by mistake, he could not tell an untruth. So, so Sri Ramakrishna now says, I do not worry about myself. I mean, Holy Mother says, Holy Mother, to Holy Mother, Ras Bihari Maharaj is saying that I do not worry about myself. I have a different feeling about it. What I want to know is this. I address you as my mother. Are you really my mother? Now he is getting confused. He says, I'm not asking or expressing the doubts because sometimes I myself doubt you whether you are really my mother, the Divine Mother. Then mother says, who else am I? I am your own mother. Disciple then Ras Bihari Maharaj says, you may say so, but I do not clearly see this. Now he is trying to explain to mother that if you are my real mother, then why don't I get that feeling? Why don't I get that conviction? Why don't I get that faith and depend on you, just as a child depends on the mother? The disciple says, you may say so, but I do not clearly see this. Naturally and spontaneously, I know the mother who gave birth to my body as my own mother. So, my biological mother who has given me birth, I know, and I always call her my mother. But how can you be? But can I think of you likewise? I want to think, but somehow that faith is not coming. Mother says, alas, it is true indeed. So she says, yes, I agree with you. Well, people normally have a tendency to consider their biological mothers as the only mother. They cannot think or conceive of somebody else, a divine personality, as our mother. But a few moments later, Holy Mother said, yes, what you say is true. But she said, my child, he alone is our father and mother. He alone has become our father and mother. So she says, ultimately, the Lord Himself can only be our father, our mother, our friend, or everything. Tvameva mata, pita tvameva, tvameva bandhu, sakha tvameva. So all these uh, relationships which we have, the temporary relationships which we have because of our biological inheritance. We have a biological mother, we have a biological father, biological brothers, sisters. But if you follow Sri Ramakrishna's principle of Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka, who is one's father, who is one's mother? They are there as long as they are alive. The physical body has given rise to this body. But what about the spirit? It is pure consciousness. So the eternal alone, the pure consciousness which never dies, the pure Satchidananda Brahman, he alone can be our real father and mother. Father and mother in the sense that we need protection. A child says he needs his mother because he feels secure. A biological child definitely has a tendency to depend, at least till the child grows up. It has a tendency to hold on to the mother for security. It has so much faith and belief that his mother will always come to his rescue. But in the ultimate, from the ultimate standpoint, the not the just the physical or the mental, the biological standpoint, Sri Ramakrishna or the Ishta or the eternal Brahman who has taken this form as Sri Ramakrishna can alone be our true father and mother. The more we have faith, Holy Mother says, my child, he alone should be considered as our father and mother. So, if we believe in the eternal Lord who never ceases, the biological father may one day die, the biological mother also may one day pass away. Then where do we go? Where do we get that security? Can we consider somebody as our eternal father or the eternal mother? It is our Ishta or the God or the Ishvara whom we worship, or Sri Ramakrishna in this case. In this case, he is telling Sri Ramakrishna is your father, is your mother, is your everything. So this conversation ends, and then on 16th December 1912, Rasbihari Maharaj asks certain question. I raised the topic of visions and asked mother, people say they have visions. Are they subjective or can they be actually seen with one's physical eyes? Now, this is a very important thing because when you enter spiritual life, there is a tendency for all the spiritual aspirants to get some kind of vision, to develop faith. There's nothing wrong in that because the transcendent or the higher experience, the subtle experience that the subtle world is true, that there can be reality in the subtle world. It is as real or more real than the physical world. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked by Narendranath, Swami Vivekananda, have you seen mother? He said, I have not only seen mother, but I see her more clearly than I do you. So our physical seeing, our physical vision, the physical vision that we have is compared to the real spiritual vision is less powerful. That is what Holy Mother says. But it is a subjective thing. If it were to be objective, then everybody would see. If you have a vision, other people also would have the vision. Just as when you see the chair, you can expect the other person who is near you also to see the chair, though he may see it in a different color depending on his sense organ, the eyes. A blind person may not see the chair, but he can feel it. So, sensory experience, seeing something through physical eyes and seeing something subjectively, which is known as vision, are totally different. That's why Mother says they are all subjective. But I had seen one actually with these physical eyes. It was at Kamarpukur. Mostly, according to Holy Mother, most of the people, when they get such visions, they see it, really they see it. But they are mostly subjective. But once Holy Mother had an objective vision also. I actually saw with physical eyes. It was in Kamarpukur, a girl like Radhu, about 11 to 12 years old, wearing Gerua clothes with a string of Rudraksha beads around her neck. Her hair all rough and dry would accompany me wherever I went. So this experience, she says she had in Kamarpukur, where she always saw a girl about 11 or 12 years old wearing Gerua colored dress and with Rudraksha beads around her neck and hair not very clean but rough and dry. So, like a typical sannyasin, and she would be accompanying her wherever she went. Then, Holy Mother decided to perform Panchatapa. If you go to Nilambar Babu's garden house in near Belur Math, there is a terrace where they show the place where Mother performed Panchatapa. What is Panchatapa? I performed Panchatapa at Nilambar Babu's rented house at Belur. Yogin Ma also did it. After this, the girl disappeared. I saw her no more. So, when she constantly had this vision, she decided to do Panchatapa. In that Panchatapa, what the sadhaka is supposed to do is in four corners on a terrace. Four corners, there will be bright blazing fire in a hot summer. The blazing sun will be above, and you have to sit in the center on an asana, and on all the four corners, north, east, west, and south, there will be a blazing fire. So Holy Mother sat and did that Panchatapa for several days. And from and as a result, her skin became very dark because of the terrible heat. Terrible heat on all the sides and the sun shining brightly, the midday scorching sun, which would it was a terrible tapasya which she did. But after that, she says, I didn't see the vision of this small girl. Then the disciple says, what is the need of tapasya, austerity? Mother says it is necessary. Look at Yogin. How much does she fast even now? She practices intense austerities. Golap is an adept in japa. So here Mother is saying tapasya is not just fasting or doing some kind of self-denial to the organs. Even japa, continuously saying japa can be a tapasya. One day Naren's mother came to visit me. Naren said to her, perhaps you had practiced austerities. Therefore, you got Vivekananda as your son. Repeat them and then you may get another. So, Naren told her that what is the result of austerities? Perhaps you will get a son, a great son, spiritual son. So, unless one has done, that's why they say, unless you have done tapasya for several lives, you will not get the spiritual inclination. You have to perform tapasya so that in some future life, by the grace of God or by the grace of Mother, you will get something which is very valuable. Like Holy Bhuvaneshwari Devi got Narendra, the world mover, prophet, as her own son because she had fasted. Swami Vivekananda said she had prayed to the Vishweshwara Shiva in Banaras and offered puja there and decided to fast for several months before Vivekananda was born. So he believed that it is because of the tapasya, of the self-denial, of the self-control of her mother, that he was born in the family, in the womb of uh, Bhuvaneshwari Devi. So she says, my mother, Swamiji says, it's not just an accident. It's because of the tapasya of my mother, the wonderful self-denial or the austerities which my mother fasted for months and months and months, so that she would get a holy son. And that is why uh, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you repeat the she told his mother that it is because of your previous life's tapasya and this life's tapasya I was born. So if you repeat it in this life also, if you continue, then there is a chance that another great spiritual son will be born to you in some other life. So mother says, Master Sri Ramakrishna practiced all kinds of disciplines. He used to say that I have made the mold, now you may cast the image. He had told Gaurima that I have made the mold. You have to just cast the image. You don't have to perform all the tapasya. You have to just understand the essence of Sri Ramakrishna's message. Casting the image means trying to follow or trying to practice to some extent at least the mold which Sri Ramakrishna has set will give us an idea of what type of personality we should be. If we are cast in the same mold, then we will have a few qualities at least of Sri Ramakrishna. So that is what he means, that I have made the mold. You don't have to make a mold and try to practice all these things. You just try to imitate or see what I have done and try to cast the image in my mold, the mold which is already ready. So you don't have to think and use your discrimination. It is ready. You have to just copy what I did, perform japa, do all the spiritual practices, and one day you will be casting the image in the mold that I have prepared. That is what Sri Ramakrishna seems to be telling. So now disciple is asking the question, what is meaning of casting the image? I understood you have made the mold and you have to cast the image. What is the real meaning after that? That means, so the disciple has asked. Then Bhudev, who was another disciple who was sitting near Holy Mother, he says, casting the mold, casting the image in the mold made by Sri Ramakrishna means to meditate on the master. When you meditate on the master, what happens? You meditate on his qualities. You just don't meditate on the picture. When the Guru gives you the mantra, you just don't meditate. You are not asked to meditate just on the image. Of course, you can use the image as a doorway to reach the consciousness which is at the background. But you have to imagine the various qualities of the master, of Sri Ramakrishna or your Ishta, which will enable you to understand Sri Ramakrishna in reality. So to meditate on the master and his qualities, his divine Leela, his divine drama or Leela as it is known. Krishna, when you meditate on Krishna, you meditate on the Krishna Leela. So any incarnation, you just can't meditate on the figure, figure. For example, Sri Ramakrishna, at least we have an image, we have a photograph of Sri Ramakrishna. But if you Krishna, we have to just meditate on the painting made by somebody. We do not know how Krishna looked like. But at the same time, you know, there are certain qualities, certain actions which Krishna did, certain characteristics, certain moral values he practiced. If you meditate on the Leela, then it is known as Leela Chintana. So that Leela Chintana will help you to mold yourself, to cast the image in the mold prepared by Thakur. So Thakur seems to be saying that I have done 16 times. You do 1/16 of that and you will realize God. So he has done whatever was necessary. He has cast the image, the mold. But you have to pour the image, pour the casting the you have to cast the image with pour the liquid, and then it will settle down and become an image. So casting of image means to meditate on the master and mold yourself after him. So this is, today we will stop here. If there are but there is, Holy Mother says yes, he has understood it. She is saying Bhudev has understood it. To cast the image means to meditate and contemplate on the master, to think of the various incidents of his life. By meditating on him, one gets all the spiritual moods which he had. So it's such a easy thing, casting the image in the mold made by Sri Ram Krishna. If you just meditate, do the Leela Chintana, read the gospel, read the Leela Prasanga. That is why when after taking initiation, it is always advisable to focus on the image that you are meditating. If you have been given the Krishna mantra is a symbol. It is Nama. It has a Rupa. The Nama is Krishna, the Rupa is also of Krishna. So also Nama Rupa, Sri Ram Krishna has a Nama, name, and the Rupa. So when you repeat the mantra, you also think of the Rupa. But that is not enough. When Brahmananji was asked, when they made the Belur Math statue, the marble statue, Brahmananji was called and requested, just see if he looks like Thakur. They wanted confirmation. The sculptor wanted to know whether he has made the image properly. Then Brahmananji, in a very high spiritual mood, said, what image of Sri Ram Krishna can I tell you? I saw him 24 hours. He looked different to me every moment. What did he mean? That did not mean that Sri Ram Krishna changed his physical appearance. But at the same time, his qualities, his Leela was so diverse that in different spiritual moods, he used to appear as a different person. So, Swami Brahmananda says, which Sri Ram Krishna you want me to see in this image? Whatever you have made is fine. It's a close resemblance of Thakur, of Sri Ram Krishna. But the real Ram Krishna we will not understand. For that, you just need the Nama given by your Guru, the Rupa, the image which you meditate on, plus you have to think of the various incidents of his life. So Holy Mother says, to cast the image in the mold made by Thakur, you have to think of the various incidents of his life. By meditating on him, one gets all the spiritual moods. So by meditating on his Radha Bhava or Krishna Bhava, or he had different moods. So when you meditate on the incident of Sri Ram Krishna, either in the gospel or the Leela Prasanga, you will get those qualities. Plus, he used to say, Sri Ram Krishna used to say, one who remembers me never suffers from want of food or from other physical privations. So this is a great promise Sri Ram Krishna has made. Even Narendranath, when he lost his father, when they were about to lose their house, Sri Ram Krishna said, don't worry, they will get the basic food and the clothes to wear and the simple things. So nobody who thinks of the master, one who Sri Ram Krishna himself has promised, you will never suffer from want of food or other physical privations. So Maku says, did he say this himself? So she was surprised. She asked Holy Mother. Mother says, yes, these are his very words from his mouth. By remembering him, one gets rid of all sufferings. Don't you see that all his devotees are happy? Elsewhere, you will not find devotees like those of the master. Here in Banaras, I see so many holy men, but can you point out one who is like his devotees? So, this is what Sri Ram Krishna, the Holy Mother says. The disciple asks, there is a reason for that, Mother. About him, we feel as if the market has only come to a close. All the signs of the market are there. People are still moving about. The devotees and intimate disciples of the master are still alive. We feel that the master, as it were, is very near to us. He has not gone away to a great distance. We shall get the response if we but call on him. So one advantage of meditating on Sri Ramakrishna, he is nearer to our age. That's why the disciple says, we feel that he is, because only a generation before, we have seen Holy Mother who lived with Sri Ramakrishna, who was the Shakti of Sri Ramakrishna. We have met some disciples. The same argument you can say, that we are disciples of somebody who had seen the Holy Mother, who had perhaps seen Sri Ramakrishna. So that means we are so close, we definitely will get a response as if he were alive. So with this, we will conclude today. If there are some questions, I will just see the chat and then we will close for today. We are already late. So now there is only one question and I would like to answer it in the next class. How would you describe Satchidananda? This is the question somebody is asked. It's a very long answer. Sat, Chit and Ananda, three aspects of Brahman or reality. To explain that, it will take one whole class. So I would not answer it right now. But briefly, I can say Sat means that which is eternally existing. Nobody wants to die. Everybody wants to be eternal. The very idea of death is so fearful. We want to live. We want to always eternally be existing. So that is Sat. That is our very nature. Satchidananda is our nature. Sat, Chit is always knowing, knowledge. So any consciousness or knowledge, we cannot be without, even in sleep, we are conscious that we are sleeping. So when we are dreaming, we are conscious that we are dreaming. When we are in the waking state, we are conscious. So consciousness is a common factor. Even if we leave this body, we have the consciousness that we are existing, we are taking up another body. So the consciousness, the eternal existence, eternal consciousness are closely connected. And Ananda is the joy, the highest bliss. People run after small things. They want sweets, they want smaller things, but they don't get eternal bliss. They get bliss today, but get a stomach ache tomorrow. They may be happy after eating a sweet, but they will get pain in the stomach tomorrow. So it is not a permanent happiness, but Ananda is something permanent. So our scripture says Sat Chit Ananda Brahman. Brahman, which is eternal existence, which all of us share. Every jiva shares this eternal existence. Only thing he thinks he is temporary. Only he is afraid that he will lose his individuality because of the ego. So it's the ego which makes the Sat look limited. The eternal look like it is going to end. We are afraid that we will die. So Sat makes you feel that you are eternal. Chit is makes you feel that you are eternally conscious. And Ananda makes you feel that you are eternally blissful. So that is why we should meditate on our Ishta, on the on our Ishta Devata as Satchidananda. Whether you meditate on Rama, Krishna, or any god or goddess, the idea behind our Ishta is Satchidananda. That is in brief what Satchidananda is. We will discuss it in the next class. So I'll take leave now. We are already late. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.